Welcome to the 1% Life Show. I'm your host, Peak Performance Coach and Trainer. Today we are talking about perspective. And perspective is such an interesting thing. Oh, by the way, for those of you who don't know what I'm doing, it looks like a random truck stop, which is really crazy. I am doing a cross-country tour with my guy. And we're traveling from, where'd we start? Georgia 2 days ago. Yesterday maybe even. Spent the night in Tennessee last night. We are rolling through, we went through Kentucky, we're in Illinois, and apparently in like an hour I'm meeting my amazing assistant, Becky North, who's watching with us in Missouri, which is so cool. And the South is an interesting place. It's a really awesome place. But I wanted to talk to you about perspective because some things have come up for me personally when it comes to perspective that my partner has really helped shape my head around and get me to realize that there's another way of thinking about it that can really allow me to have personal freedom in my life, emotional freedom in my life. And so, look, I'll admit, I never had a desire to come to the South. I never had a desire to travel the South. It was always a place that I was like, I don't belong in the South. People like me don't go to the South. And this was, and there's a lot of things going on in the world around race right now. Tensions are heightened. It's there's a lot of emotional trauma happening, really, if you were to consider it that way, because people's identities are wrapped into race. And so we were driving down the freeway and, I wasn't going to talk about this, but I guess I am now. And all of a sudden, I'm like doing my work, I'm like on my computer, and there's this massive Confederate flag hanging. And he's like, hey, check it out. And so I look and I'm like, wow, I got this immediate visceral reaction and charge. I was like, is that shit real? Is that happening? Like, all my fears and concerns about the South, like, that's here. It's still here. And okay, so I just want to say, that's not necessarily how I feel. But in that moment, I was really triggered. It's okay, you're good. I was really triggered to my past and the stories that I had around, race and the South and all of the things that kept me emotionally trapped. And he brought up a really interesting point. He said, just because, and it was on a flea market, it was like a bit on the property of a flea market. He said, just because that flag is there doesn't mean that, like, you don't know what those people necessarily believe. It's not that they necessarily support slavery. It's not that they necessarily support. And I was like, how can you say that? How can you say that, right? And of course, I'm like getting into my stuff because I'm, brown or, quote unquote brown East Indian, and he's Caucasian. I'm like, you don't know, and so I'm like, you don't know. That's where you don't get it. That's where you don't get it. He's like, no, Joanie, that's where you don't get it. That's where you don't get that when you continue to hold on to these stories, you will always be trapped and you will not be able to be free, emotionally free. Like, do we really know what these people feel who are posting that? Do we really know that they're racists and bigots? And in my heart, I'm like, yes, we know that. And he says, what if for them it means something different? What if for them it means, and I was so triggered. I was so caught up in my identity of the past and the stories that led me to the belief systems that I have, that I wasn't willing to see it, to understand it, to hear it any other way. And it was like, I was then attacking him as if he was the bad guy, right? And I wasn't attacking him like in my body I was, right? Like there was this visceral reaction, like, you just don't get it. But the more I started thinking about it, and he started describing, he's like, God doesn't see color. God doesn't see, light, dark, blah, 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 and all this stuff. And it's like, if we are going out there and we're going to create massive impact in the world, which we are together, then you've got to free yourself from the chains of these stories that you are not your color. He said, you are not your color, and you're not your race. You are so much more than that as a being who's in this world, who's out there creating change, who's out there living your spiritual path, your journey. You're so much more than that. And it's all of these exact stories that create the division, that create the separation between people, right? It's like, I am my color, I am my race, I am that, but wait, you are more. And until we can begin to individually, and I get everybody's perspective, like, I guess I get people who feel like they've been discriminated against, I get their perspective more than others, but I'm beginning to now change my perspective on that. And I'm beginning to now believe that, do we know just because something on the surface is presented a certain way that it is actually that way, right? Are we not giving our meaning to the specific thing? When I see a Confederate flag, I instantly assume total racists, total bigots, total this, that, and the other, and all of this stuff, and I'm like, get me out of here, right? Like, get me out of the South. And I had that moment, that reaction, and it was like, man, I hadn't seen that since I was here. I was like really happy about people, Southern hospitality is just amazing. Sorry, I'm cutting my head off for those of you listening to me live. But I had to check myself in that moment, because when we feel that visceral reaction, those negative emotions what's happening is they're arising due to some meaning that we have given the thing from our past, right? All of my past stuff around race started coming up in that moment. And I gave that thing probably more meaning than it needed to have. And I wanted to share that with you because it wasn't meant to be strictly a race conversation today. It's meant to be a perspective conversation. And sometimes we believe that the way that we're seeing something is the only way to see the thing. Sometimes we believe that that's how it is, and this is who they are, and this is their beliefs, and that's it, and there's no other way to see it, no other way to hear it. I remember even just saying to him earlier, I was like, no, if somebody is holding this, that means this, right? And that was my meaning, I gave that. And I can completely understand the other side of it, but it's when we begin to release the emotional chains that have been holding us back from just being free that will create the connection, that will create the alignment between one race to another and all of us as one homogenous species, right? That I think we finally begin to be free. And I wanted to share that with you because ultimately perspective may be given to you when you're young, right? We're raised with family, we're raised with belief systems, we're raised with, people who were raised around that here in the South. And maybe that's their norm, that's their part of the culture, right? Their culture for many. And the more that we travel, the more that we get out there, the more that we see and experience things that are uncomfortable to us, the more our perspective begins to shift and evolve and transform. And, I was talking to my partner's parents the other day, and his mom reached over at dinner and said something so beautiful. She said, Joanie, I'm going to get you to love the South and Southern people. And it almost broke my heart because she knew the story that I'm not really proud of, but a story that I have the ability to change, a story that I have the ability to free myself of, a story that will allow me to be free and feel more free and accept people, not because of where they geographically live and because of the past and the meaning that I gave certain things, but because I'm allowing myself to see and experience things from new eyes, from new lenses, from a new person that I am now, and not from the child that created these beliefs growing up. So perspective is everything. Perspective matters, and how you navigate through the world and the perspective that you choose to have will really allow you to either feel trapped, to feel anger from your past, directed towards things that may be completely irrelevant to what's really happening, what's really intended, what's really going on in the mind of somebody else. And allow you to just, see people for who they are, accept that everybody's doing the best that they can with the resources that they have available to them. They're really doing the best that they can. We're never going to see things the same way, nor would we really want to, because that would be a really boring world. Really boring world. And so when we begin to examine the things that come up in us and that give us an emotional rise, and start questioning that and saying, where is this coming from? And is this serving me right now? And is this serving me in my life? And what if there was a different way to think and a different way to be? What could I choose to believe right now? What could I choose to think right now that will lead to a new belief system that will emotionally set me free? So Rockstars, that was on my mind today. We're hopping back in Betty. And we're going to cruise down 70 pretty soon. And go see my amazing assistant, Becky, and give her a big hug since I'm in her neck of the woods. So if you got value from today's episode, even if it just allowed you to think in a way that you've never thought before, do me a favor, tag somebody who needs to hear this, share this out. And if you're listening to us on one of our podcasting platforms, leave us a review and leave us a star rating. That's how we grow. That's how we get out to the world and how I can continue to bring you content 5 days a week. All right, rock stars, get out there, change some lives today, and be truly unstoppable. Peace.